Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagenow, and we are back here in studio for another action-packed, fun-filled episode of the Gold Standard in Iowa Conservative Podcast. I have Sarah Curry in studio with me today. Greetings, Sarah. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to be here.
Good. So you made a special trip in just to do the podcast, right?
I did.
Okay,
yes.
Good. Well, we will endeavor to make it worth your time, but usually when I let expectations get ahead of us, we just don't get the same end product. So you may have to carry us too. So
that's okay. My nerdiness will come out.
All right. Reminder before we go any further, we are on YouTube and Rumble, iTunes, Spotify, your preferred audio platform. Make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you are sharing it and helping us get this out to Iowans, right? Because you're subscribed on all platforms, right?
I don't even know what all those things are.
Okay, you don't even know what those are.
But my 4-year-old is like, Mommy, when are you going to be on the TV again?
Oh, good.
Because we stream it so they can watch me. So he's very excited.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's mine kind of grew up with seeing Dad on TV every once in a while, and it's just like, oh, whatever. Like they're totally not impressed. But,
I mean, he's 4. It doesn't take much.
Yeah, no, my daughter's like, Daddy, did you do a podcast today? Like, well, yeah. Well, what'd you do? I talked about taxes. Oh, she's always just so disappointed in the content.
Now, when I pick my kindergartner up from school and I'm on the phone, he's like, Mom, do you have to talk about taxes again?
Yeah. Yes.
It's like, one day you'll like this, honey.
Yes, absolutely. So, all right. I'm not quite sure we do have a lot to cover, I think, whether we get through it all or not. And I'm not quite sure how to tackle this, but we had this article that you sent me, and it's from Iowa Capital Dispatch. And this has been a little while ago, but the article is actually a defense of county compensation boards. So I feel like we ought to at least, what is a county compensation board? Like, are you up? Should we at least address what the article is? So, and as it's supposed to be a layer between the elected official and them voting on their own pay at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, and the reason why this came up and is why it's in a news article at all is because the big income tax bill that you and John talked about earlier, there were a few tweaks to some local government issues there, and this was one of them. So that's why it's come up in the news, because there was a change made to that.
Yeah, well, and there have been efforts to tweak that over the years, and I think the frustration is that a county board of supervisors, each member of the supervisors can appoint their representative to this compensation board, and then that person votes on a recommendation for what the salary increase ought to be, and then the board of supervisors then kind of accepts it or not.
Right, so you can't, take your pitchforks and go to your county courthouse or wherever they meet and just say, you gave yourselves a 10% raise. Well, the compensation board said we could, and they said it was reasonable, so we're just doing what they told us to.
Right.
It's kind of that government, he said, she said, but we all get to benefit from it thing.
Right. We have legislators for whom county compensation boards is a major reform. Like they truly believe that it is the thing that needs to be tackled. I know that Representative Bobby Kaufman being one of them. He has long been somebody that wants to tackle these things. So anyway, but the actual county compensation board isn't the part about this article that we really enjoyed. It is the author that just takes swing after swing at county supervisors. It
was really actually comical because I'm looking through news articles like to see the commentary on the compensation board changes that were in the legislature. And this article really isn't about
not at all.
Compensation boards. It's just saying, hey, supervisors are doing a really bad job across Iowa, and here's all these stories, and I'm like, they just keep coming. Yeah. Like it's literally like a rant in an article. It's kind of awesome.
Yeah, and some of these, I will say, it's kind of amusing. Some of them maybe not even fair, but I mean, it just starts. This is the very opening line in the article. Some of the very worst elected public officials in Iowa are members of our county boards of supervisors. Well, that's pretty bold from Iowa Capital Dispatch that is not trying to argue that Republican legislators are the worst elected officials in Iowa, because that's usually where they're going with their offering. But this author has covered supervisors meetings in 7 different counties, and generally I'm not impressed. one supervisor engaged in repeated acts of domestic violence. Another sole purpose was getting enough gravel on the road in front of his house. I mean, that checks out. I mean, you want to talk about self-interests are always going to rise to the top.
Oh, yeah.
On these boards of supervisors. So one friend told me before he ran for supervisor, he was doing it because he could supplement his retirement plan. So here's where I want to start with the first one. And like we were having this conversation just now about the compensation for county supervisors.
Yeah.
And not just on these compensation committees, but a lot of county supervisors are pretty well compensated in Iowa.
If you think about Iowa as a whole, we don't have a lot of big urban centers. And so if you're living in rural Iowa and you're a farmer or the farmer's wife, it makes a lot of sense to be on the county board of supervisors. You get paid, you get government health benefits, and you don't have to leave your small town. So it makes sense. Now, is that beneficial for the taxpayer? Are they doing it for the right reasons? I mean, that opens up a whole other host of questions, but I definitely think there's a difference between a Polk County supervisor in Des Moines versus, I don't know, pick your rural county.
Well, okay, let's do that. Your county.
Yep.
Mills County, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do the county supervisors make in Mills County?
They just raised their pay. So I want to say it's $45,000 a year.
Okay. State legislators make $25,000.
I mean, yeah, and it's a lot cheaper to live in Mills County than it is in Des Moines.
And I'm not saying they shouldn't make $45,000. That's not. I always kind of pin it to what do our statewide officials make? What do the state level officials make? So, and I'm guessing the Mills County supervisor is not a full-time job. They might classify it as one, but I'm guessing it's a few hours a week, right?
No, because actually, I know most of them, and they have other full-time jobs or they do other things.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, and then I'm sure they get county health benefits. I'm sure they get IPERS. They're probably in on all that too. It just, I'm not mean to bang too much on county pay, other than it seems to be that it's way ahead of state legislative pay for sure. Here in Polk County, the Polk County Board of Supervisors make more than the governor.
I mean, I do see a problem with that. We're talking about property taxes. We're talking about the problem. And I mean, I don't know if you get paid a lot of money, you try to stay in something, and maybe there's, in the business world, we call it the agency problem. Like, who are you loyal to? Are you loyal to the business or the business owner? And so I think it does cause a problem. Now, we're not saying every county supervisor is like this. There's some counties where they're not compensated at all or not very much, but then there's others where it's way out of whack. So I think it's something to look into. I think it's something, I don't know. I think the discussion of the county compensation board in the legislature brought it to light.
Yeah.
And
I think that's right.
A lot of people weren't talking about it. And so I think that's what's interesting. But yeah, this article was just, it was hilarious because he just ranted on them. And I know some county supervisors, and I don't think they're doing a bad job, but he really painted it like they're all doing a really bad job.
Yeah, I didn't care for the swipe in the article that some of the worst are business people who think government should be run like a business. There is nothing wrong with hoping that government should run like a business. And most business people are aware that government's different. It doesn't turn a profit. You can't look at it the same way. But there's absolutely no reason not to apply efficiency principles and things like that to government.
When I hear people say we're going to run government like a business, is exactly what it is. It's like, oh, we don't have this never-ending pot of money called a taxpayer. Let's try to be responsible. Like, we have a limited source of revenue. Yeah.
I agree. Do you know who the highest paid elected official is in the state of Iowa?
I don't.
It's the Polk County attorney. It is well into the 200s.
Really?
Yeah. So, and
no, I thought school superintendents were probably
they're not elected.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because they're paid a pretty penny.
Yes, they are. And then if you want to go public officials, now, if you pull up the state salary data, which is an interesting sidebar here, you can look all this stuff up. It's all public record. County employees, state level employees, you can look them all up online. And if you go into the state salary database, the highest paid is going to be Kirk Ferentz, football coach at Iowa, which I know that bothers a lot of people. I would say that it is funded by the athletic department and the revenue off of the football program. You may not accept that reason, but it is not state tax dollars going to fund that salary. But I make that point just that you can go in and type these in, and then there is a county database that you go in and look up anyone from your supervisors, attorney, down to who runs the public works department. So,
well, and I know in my county, I think the auditor, the assessor, the treasurer, like they all got pay raises this year. All of them did.
And I'm not even arguing that that's inappropriate. I mean, cost of living and maybe I'm even arguing for a modest increase in legislative pay. I don't know. But I don't think that it's all lined up. I don't think that it's...
Well, I don't think there's similarities, right? So I live in Mills, rural Southwest Iowa. Like, I don't know how that compares with rural Northeast Iowa. Like, are they paid similarly? Is there similar cost of living expenses? What's the average income in that community? I haven't ran all that data and I haven't looked at it, but listening to some of this conversation about the compensation boards and then hearing taxpayers continuously upset about their property taxes, it's something that we might look into in the future and just look at the data and see what it tells us.
Yeah, I think that's right. You and I talk offline about what's the next thing that we need to look at. And maybe I'll throw that out for our listeners a little bit too. We want to dig in deeper on local government. Well, Sarah wants to dig in deeper. I just want to talk about it. But dig in deeper on these local government issues.
Yeah.
And we really do thrive off of the input from our members, from our listeners. You're communicating with ITR members all the time and elected officials and people around the state. And that's really where we get a lot of the idea for future reform. So, we have people talking about county compensation committees. Well, okay, let's take a look at that and see what's there. But, I wanted to use that as a segue though. What are you looking at right now? What are people coming to you with? What have you been working on?
So we just had all those budget hearings and the tax hearings. And I heard from a lot of people, they didn't understand the tax mailings. They didn't understand what they meant.
Right.
They didn't understand.
We need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Too.
So they just didn't understand it. I had a lot of people just calling me, what does this mean? Like, why does my grandma have rural on there and then I don't? And explain they lived in the city and she didn't. And then, a lot of people went to their meetings and they expressed their frustration. And then they came back to me and they said, yeah, they didn't change a dang thing. Everything's the same. So we went to all this trouble and we voiced our concerns and it's the same good old boys club. And I'm hearing that across the state. Like, it's not just in one area. It's not rural versus urban, Dallas County. A lot of the sentiments in Dallas County are the same sentiments I heard out of Scott County. It's all over. So I think there's definitely this feeling from Iowa taxpayers that their local elected officials are not listening to them, or they're just appeasing them and they're saying, okay, we'll take a look at it. The other thing, it kind of hit me a little personal because, I'm into this stuff. Like, I think it's really fun. And for the listeners that don't know, I have 3 small children, 6, 4, and 2.
Who love taxes.
Oh, they do. Yeah. But, I couldn't go to my meetings. We had violin lessons one night. Someone got sick the other night. And so I really started thinking about it. And as great as the notices are, and as wonderful as it is that we're trying to get citizens to be engaged with their local elected officials, I shouldn't have to take time away from my family and my children to make sure they're doing the job I elected them to do.
Yeah. Well, when we were out at Dallas County for the budget hearing, it was an older, group of folks that turned out that probably, not universally, but a lot of folks at retirement age, and the meeting was in the morning, and thankfully I have a employer that encourages me to be active in such matters, but it's hard for folks with busy lives to go out and do these things. I couldn't go to my city one. I didn't think I had soccer practice. I had to take a kid too, right? And so what are you going to do? Now, I was frustrated at Dallas County, but my city's actually kind of where I think they ought to be this year. So I had no complaints. I just wanted to go. So anyway.
But that said, we're hearing from a lot of ITR listeners. They're saying they didn't understand the mailer. They were busy. They couldn't make it. One guy told us that he got the notice about his meeting after the meeting had already happened.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to go, and he just didn't know when it was. We had some people say, it's not on the website. Why can't I get it? And I think this was in Jefferson County. I called them and I said, very politely, I was like, hey, where's the notice? Is it somewhere on your website? I can't find it. And they're like, oh, we totally forgot to put it up. So, again, honest mistake. But if we're going to communicate this stuff to taxpayers and we want taxpayers to be engaged, we need to find ways that are appropriate. And, if you're in your late 30s and you've got 3 small children, maybe showing up to a hearing when it's bedtime is not the best, or during the workday, that's not best. Maybe we need to have some way that we can communicate digitally with emails, or I don't know what the answer is, but I think people want to be heard and they don't feel like they're being heard, and we have to change that. They also want to know what's going on, and these complicated government documents are not the answer.
Yeah, and that was really, I got a couple of thoughts on that. The notifications weren't enough this year.
I will say, let's look at the glass half full, right? They're better than nothing.
Absolutely.
And it did get people to turn out. So we're moving in the right direction. But yes, everyone here in the office, I mean, we've talked about this at length. How do you make them better? How do you make it less confusing? And unfortunately, the legislature tried, but I don't think that they solved that problem.
I think and I have not yet had this conversation, at least with the folks that ultimately wrote the bill, folks like Kaufman and Dawson yet. I don't think they intended this to be the fix. I think this was, what can we do now? Session's winding down. When we had Senator Scott Webster in here, he was advocating and absolutely right on this. And he advocated during session, it's got to have the individualized number on it.
Oh, yes.
That this will never be adequate until it communicates to that property owner, how much is my bill going up? You can dress it up with whatever different numbers and slices and dices. I think until it says, I'm going to pay $300 more next year, it doesn't have the meaning, or as much meaning, or the right meaning.
I 100% agree with that. If they can send us our tax statements in the mail,
right,
and if they can send us our assessment notices in the mail, and they can send me Lord knows what else in the mail, it's not a cost problem. Yeah. Like, they can do it. And we have the technological advances now that we can do that. And so I think that's something we need to move towards.
And at the same time, we have heard criticisms that, well, this costs a lot of money to mail this out. Just at the same time that they don't have any problem printing and mailing out the individualized information on your bill, they also don't complain about the postage and the printing to send out the bill either. Mm-hmm. So they only complain when it's a cost they're not recouping money off of. The other thing that Senator Webster was talking about yesterday, because as you well know, he was the floor manager of the universal basic income thing, and I'm not going down that path anymore, but he was talking about cities and how they respond to external pressure, these cities and counties. And he said, if you get a lot of folks from the community coming in, whether they're running nonprofits or, here in Polk County, it'd be the Harkin Institute or whatever, that are really pushing you to establish a universal basic income pilot, it becomes difficult to say no.
Right.
Or the next community over's doing it and they're pushing you to come along with it. And so I thought it was a good point to remember, not because it excuses them for doing it, but it is a reminder that showing up and talking to your local officials should make an impact, right?
100%. And I think that really is a great segue into where I'm looking next. And this is, again, thanks to some ITR listeners. So, local governments want to spend money and cities want to keep up with the Joneses, right? Oh, this one's got this, so we have to have this, and it's going to cost money, so we're going to issue this bond, whatever. And so what I've been seeing a lot of, schools in particular, they're building this new stadium. They're building this daycare. They're building this new technology, whatever, right? So now we have to do it. And then voters turn down their bond. Well, now they're turning to revenue bonds to pay for it. It's still tax dollars, but it doesn't require taxpayer approval.
Yeah.
And so, I've seen some cities in this case where they wanted to build something and they held a general election, and the citizens in that community overwhelmingly voted it down. And so the city just changed gears. They went and used their local option sales tax money, and they did it anyway. And so I have a problem with that. It's like, if you're going to go to the citizens and say, is this what we want? And they say no, I don't think you should be allowed to just turn around and get your county board or your school board or your city council to vote it in with their 3 or 5 people and bypass voters. And so I'm really looking at trying to get voter approval for revenue bonds, because if these projects are worthwhile, then voters and citizens need to be engaged. And again, as a working mom, it's a lot easier for me to find the time to go vote and make my voice heard that way versus going to a meeting, sitting in line, preparing my statements, and then having to give this talk with my 6-year-old, sitting next to me. Mm-hmm. And so I like the idea of voting. I like that idea. And so, I think it all comes down to just spending and decision making, and people need to be engaged, and we need to find ways to increase that engagement. And I think, and going behind taxpayers' back is not good.
When there is a bond referendum and it is voted down, the answer is no. And yet far too often the governmental entity hears that as, not right now, go find some screwy other mechanism to pay for this.
But to Senator Webster's point, it's like, oh, we have to have, I'm just going to use this as an example because I don't like outdoor swimming pools in Iowa. So we have to have this aquatic center. Right. It's going to draw people to our town. They're going to move here. It's economic growth, every argument in the book, right? And then the taxpayers vote it down. Well, you have this really loud group that wants the outdoor swimming pool. And so they don't let up. And they're like, you have to find a way. You have to find a way. You have to do this. And so your city council members, they should be like, okay, well, 78% or whoever voted it down, but these group of people really want it. So we have to find another way. And whether that's right or wrong, I understand the pressure, but we do need to do a better job of saying, listen to your electorate, listen to your overall power.
And a whole lot more people vote than show up at city council board of supervisor meetings.
Yeah.
But the person, and I can tell you from my experience in the legislature, someone takes the effort to actually come up to the Capitol. Okay, well, now you got to listen to them and interact with that in a way that if they only send an email, it's not the same. Or and a lot of folks just don't, they're busy. It's not that they don't care. You know what? They go to work, they got kids, they got all these other things they do. At the end of the day, the last thing they want to do is type out a long-winded email or make a phone call to their city council member that they probably have some skepticism even listening to them in the first place. So, but it doesn't mean their voice doesn't matter. And when they show up and vote, it matters.
Right. And I don't want our listeners to think like ITR hates government. I mean, we don't. We understand that there's a purpose for government, but we do think that government should listen to its people and it should do what its people want. And they shouldn't, is that? Like, they shouldn't just do what they want because they think they're a higher power or they have better ideas.
Yes, it is. It is a two-way street. I'm not anti-government either, and we've said this over and over. And if people aren't, they're not listening. There are important, essential functions of government. They have to be funded. They cost money. I think maybe there's a few of you out there that don't think we need police and fire protection. But I think most of us want to be able to call 911 and have someone show up at our house. I think most of us believe that we should have public schools. Maybe not, but maybe that's slightly less than police and fire. But we need roads. We need a court system. We need these things. We may not need aquatic centers
or convention centers, and we might not need state-of-the-art fancy jails. We need a jail,
right? But
I think there's. Yeah, and I think overall Iowans support their communities, and they want to see them thrive, and they want to see them do well. I live in the Omaha metro area, and I tell people all the time, I say this, they're like, we need all this economic development. We got to do this. We got to do this. I was like, if you had the lowest property tax in the entire Omaha metro area, people would be flocking to this place to live. And that doesn't cost you a whole lot. You don't have to spend money to do that.
Correct. I mean, that's absolutely right. So the point is, we think government, very much especially at the local level, can do better. That they can deliver those core functions, core services, get rid of the rest, and have it work to the benefit of the taxpayers, and in the long run, benefit their communities. It's not just that we want these bare bones, do nothing communities. We think it's in the long-term health of these communities to have the low property tax. And be able to that's part of stronger communities as well. Okay.
Sorry, that was my little tangent.
No, I think it's great. And one other point that I wanted, and maybe the moment has passed by here, but you had an article looking at the revenue or the bond elections back in March, is that you can draw a fairly straight line from turnout in these elections to them failing, right? I mean, that the bigger the turnout is, the more likely the bond election is going to fail, right?
Typically, yeah.
Not always, but I mean, yeah.
I mean, there have been a few occasions where the government entity asking for the bond did a huge public issue campaign and educated people on the issues. Overall, people are very supportive of property tax increases for EMS, emergency management systems. Pretty supportive of HVAC and roof and like those types of increases to the schools. Not really supportive of, I call them the shiny objects, the unnecessary items, especially today with inflation the way it is and how we're all having to cut in our own personal lives. And it's like, okay, the kids need air conditioning. Like, get it. Like, I want my kid to go to school in an air-conditioned school. Do they need a brand new concession stand for the football games that I'm not even going to? Probably not. So I think that's where the voter turnout is where we're seeing it too.
Well, I think that there's an underlying principle, and I can't point to any data on this. It's just been, and Iowans are typically fiscally conservative, just in general. And that's not even necessarily a Republican or Democrat thing. They just want to have things run well. They are willing to pay for things if they are getting value. And it may even be willing to pay, and we're not going to advocate for it, but a fee for something if they get something of value for it. They're willing to consider a debt measure if they get something they really need for it. And so it's just something to keep in mind, but it all goes back to the idea is what we're trying to do is make sure that these communities, that folks are fully informed so that they can render that opinion, so they can actually help local government say, we need this, but not that. These are the things that are of such value to our community that we are willing to pay more for them. And it's usually, if enough people show up, it's not an aquatic center.
Right. And I will say, so I went to Fairfield a few months ago, and they have this really nice theater in downtown Fairfield. And the former mayor was talking about all these initiatives they did in Fairfield, and they did all this. And so in the back of my head, I'm thinking, your property taxes have to be through the roof. Yeah. So I go to ITR Local, and I'm like, oh, the city of Fairfield's actually not too bad. Come to find out, they got private support. Yep. They did fundraisers. They did a lot to try to not put that burden on the taxpayer, and I commend them for it. And you know what? Because they did that, they have such a proud community down there. Like, people in Fairfield are just very proud, and they want to show off their community. And thankfully, they don't have a high tax burden that goes along with it. And so I think that's kind of the magic formula, the secret sauce. Community engagement, community support, both financially and through, volunteerism, but keep your tax burden low so people can still afford to live and come to your community. And so I just think that's an example of one that succeeded. Yeah,
the other example I use is the West Des Moines Mid-American Recplex out here in West Des Moines sports complex. Big, we talk about a big shiny object. The city of West Des Moines was sort of the sponsor of that, but it's funded mostly on private dollars. Mid-American, Hy-Vee, they had a robust fundraising campaign and put together, and it is a successful project that people are flocking to, and it's working. On the other hand, you had things like Urbandale where they wanted to go entirely on the backs of the taxpayer, and thankfully the taxpayer said no, but yeah, get some buy-in in the community.
But that's the difference, right? Yes. And the people here are so supportive. Like Council Bluffs, we have that big Iowa West sports complex, that indoor soccer facility right next to the Mid-America Center. The Iowa West Foundation paid for most of it. Yep. Council Bluffs Soccer Club, they fundraised for the rest of it. The city of Council Bluffs really didn't spend, I don't know if they spent anything on it, and that's a huge draw. And so that's the stuff we're talking about, right? Get that community involvement, get those private investors and donors and that kind of stuff. And I think that's when your community thrives. And that's when it does well. And that's what we're just trying to encourage. We're trying to encourage that civic engagement,
Right.
and stop running to the taxpayer and asking for a handout. Try something else.
And I would suggest that when you do one of these projects like that, they actually end up delivering sort of that community attraction in a much better way than the aquatic center does, which seems like about every town down the road has some sort of a pool or aquatic center now. But people come to town to go to the Council Bluffs Sports Complex. They will come to Council Bluffs and spend money there.
Yeah.
So, okay. I think we're about out of time because you've got a lot to do today.
I do. I'm going up to Forest City.
Yeah.
I'm going to go explore up there and meet some people and see what's going on in north central Iowa.
Are you going to bring home a new camper?
Man, I would love to.
Wouldn't that be great if you
Man.
just came back home and just pull in the driveway and, hey, kids.
I mean, we love camping, so
I know you guys do.
That would be fun. I'm actually really excited to go to Winnebago,
Yeah.
and I really want to go see some new campers and
That'd
see
be
what they've
awesome.
got going on. And I'm really kind of excited.
Yeah, no, it's gonna
Yeah.
be fun. It's be fun. All right. Well, Sarah, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. We did cover a lot of ground as offered, and hopefully we will have you back in again very soon.
Yeah,
So-
I always like coming in.
And maybe to close that we mean this. If you have ideas, if you have things that you've noticed in your local community that you think we want that input.
We really
Yeah.
do. And we're not just saying that. Like, I just had a gentleman from Scott County email me a bunch of suggestions for reforming the school finance formula and finding savings in how we fund public education. And, he did. I mean, we talked about it and we're like, this is an idea. Well, why don't we look into this a little bit more? Why don't we pull data and see what's going on? So we take all of those suggestions seriously. And, you're the citizens of Iowa.
Yeah.
We're here for you. So, give us your ideas.
We may not be able to do it all. May have good ideas, may have ideas that just won't fly, but inevitably we get enough of this and we find some really good stuff that we can work on. So, all right. Well, thank you again. Thank you, listeners. Don't forget to like and subscribe, tell your friends. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.